The ruins of great cities do not tell us everything about the people who built them. In these mud-walled streets, a mystery 5,000 years old still lingers. The key to it may lie with the river Indus, a mystical silver serpent that rises in the Himalayas and uncoils through an immense landscape. People settled on its banks despite the floods. They tamed the rivers and transformed desert into gardens. But what do we really know about them? A century of archaeological digs still hasn't solved the mystery. This civilization flourished for 500 years, then vanished into historical limbo. But it left behind a sacred heritage: water. One day at sunrise, after his morning ablutions in the waters of the Sarasvati, Srila Vyasadeva sat down to meditate. The great sage saw certain anomalies in the fibre of the millennium. He foresaw that the life of everything material would be cut short for lack of virtue. At the end of a hard day in 1920, Professor M.S. Vats gazed over the remains of Harappa, the key site in the Indus civilization. The light of the setting sun fell on walls, pavements, columns. At the same time, several hundred kilometers away, Professor R.D. Banerjee was excavating the ruins of a gigantic city, Mohenjo-Daro. In Europe, archaeologists reacted with astonishment or incredulity. European scholars had always downplayed the extent of early Asian civilizations. Since then, no less than 1,000 sites have been discovered in a region covering 1 million square kilometers. The Indus, born of the Himalayan snows and bounded by Pakistan and India, is 3,000 kilometers long. Its valley was home to a flourishing civilization. For a long time, our image of this civilization was blurred. The first archaeologists thought they had discovered cities of children. They unearthed toys, dice, whistles, marbles. The people seemed oblivious of death and war. They appeared a carefree, happy population, the Arcadians of the Indus.
Au XIXe siècle, par exemple, c'était assez admis que l'Inde était la mère des civilisations, mais en fait, les grandes civilisations, ça ne pouvait être que celles du Moyen-Orient, celles d'Égypte. Et Mortimer Wheeler, qui était un des grands archéologues britanniques travaillant en Inde l'avaient appelée la Cendrillon des civilisations, parce que c'était la petite dernière, elle semblait un peu... On a même pensé à un moment que c'était un pâle décalque des civilisations mésopotamiennes, avant de se rendre compte qu'il s'agissait de quelque chose de totalement différent en fait. Quand on a commencé à fouiller, on a bien vu qu'il n'y avait aucun matériel qui rappelait en quoi que ce soit les civilisations mésopotamiennes. Par contre, on s'est rendu compte très vite qu'on avait affaire à d'énormes villes. Il y a des sites qui font plus de 200 ou 300 hectares, ce qui va par Mohenjo-Daro, c'est probablement la plus grosse ville en superficie de toutes les villes antiques.
Mohenjo-Daro lay on the banks of the Indus, in the Sindh province of southern Pakistan. "2,000 years before Christ, this land was settled by newcomers from the border regions of ancient Persia. Today it is desert. But on this spot they founded the largest city of the Indus civilization, with 40,000 people and an area of a square kilometre. The streets reflect the genius of their builders. The city layout is a model of ancient town planning. Residential blocks are defined by long, straight arteries crossing at right angles. The main street is never less than 9 meters wide. It's easy to imagine it filled with colourful crowds. Imagine the archaeologists' surprise when they discovered that the entire city had a complex water management system. It had 80 public toilets. In the residential areas, every house had a tiled bathroom and its own well. Sewers serviced the whole city. In a unique system for a centre 4,000 years old, drains for wastewater, gutters and water collectors were dug in the main streets. In cul-de-sacs and smaller streets, wastewater was poured into bottomless jars. Some crossroads had brick containers for rubbish disposal. The most spectacular discovery was made at the top of the city. On a huge brick platform, the last refuge from the devastating floods of the Indus, the people of Mohenjo-Daro built a great bath. For their daily ablutions they came to this pool. Round about it was a gallery with fountains. The 1,000 cities of this civilization were scattered over a territory twice as large as France. One of them was on the island of Khadiabet. Desertification has now made it a narrow strip in a sea of salt. The city was Dholavira, a junction for the trade routes crisscrossing the marshy region of Kutch. The Indus builders mostly used brick, unfired bricks for walls and fired bricks for foundations. In Dholavira, archaeologists also discovered monumental stone walls, 15 meters high. The walls testify to the mastery and science of their masons, who must already have been familiar with plumb lines and water levels. Dholavira's carpenters used Himalayan cedar in columns that fitted perfectly into the finely cut and polished stonework. Here too, a complex water system serviced the city. Water was used to clean the streets. It ran off into underground conduits, which carried it beyond the city walls. Since it was discovered in 1989, an entire city has gradually been unearthed from sediment over 8 meters deep. But Dholavira has also been an endless source of questions. Archaeologists are particularly interested in the city's outskirts. For Professor R.S. Bisht and his team, Dholavira brought a fresh perspective on the technological knowledge of the people of the Indus. The dig showed that the builders of the city had burrowed right to the bedrock. As the archaeologists dug deeper and deeper, they uncovered strange structures like deep pits. For a long time, they couldn't explain their purpose.
Look at this. It's going deeper, 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 deeper. We don't know how deep it is there. You see, we have already gone down the 8 meters from the surface. And it is still going deeper. The kind of rock cut reservoir you have seen there.
Was this structure part of a defense system? Or perhaps an underground dwelling? How were these walls built? They were constructed with great care. The stones fit exactly, and the wall stands on solid rock, which also makes up the floor of the pit.
I am standing in a long and deep reservoir cut through the limestone rock. In fact, this is the first example of rock architecture, rock cut architecture by the Harappans. It is continuing for the eastward on that side, for the westward on that side. We have already confirmed the western end of this reservoir, which lies 85 meters away further west.
Dholavira finally yielded up some of its secrets. Professor Bisht believes that the city had 16 reservoirs all around it. Thanks to his work, the city plan can be recreated after 5,000 years. Dholavira was surrounded by 250,000 cubic meters of precious water. The city covered 48 hectares and had a population of 20,000. In its centre was a citadel with solid walls. Another wall separated the upper part of the city from the lower. The city had many gardens, warehouses and granaries. Dholavira's wealth came from the wheat and barley trade, and its people soon turned to the nearby sea. Even after the general plan of the city was recreated, it still took archaeologists some time to work out how the reservoirs surrounding it were filled. Drinking water has always been scarce in the Kutch marshes. Today, the sea has retreated, leaving behind a salty desert. The remaining villages have just a few wells of brackish water. And yet the people of the Indus survived in this hostile environment. 5,000 years ago, in a land alternately burnt by the sun and swept by floods, a civilization grew up because it knew how to manage water.
Les grands cours d'eau sont fondamentaux dans le développement de la civilisation de l'Indus, comme de toutes ces civilisations agricoles. C'est grâce à eux qu'on peut avoir une agriculture irriguée qui va permettre de nourrir des villes où on va avoir de plus en plus une population différente, qui ne sera plus une population de paysans, qui va devenir une population d'ouvriers, d'artisans. Et autrefois, l'Indus se répandait partout sur une immense plaine plate, et c'est sur cette plaine plate qu'on pouvait cultiver, avec le risque de voir chaque année son champ disparaître.
Every year in July, The monsoon covers the Pakistani countryside in a blanket of rain. That's when the Indus, swollen by the melting Himalayan snows, breaks its banks. It spreads everywhere, covering the earth with a coat of clay. But the floods are not considered a calamity. People welcome and respect them as a godsend. Their properties are mainly out of reach of the rising waters. How did the people of the Indus manage to tame the devastating floods 5,000 years ago? The archaeologists found the answer in the ground around Dholavira. In dry riverbeds, which become torrents during the monsoon, they found traces of stone structures. These were the remains of dams built to control the flow of water. That was the answer. The people of Dholavira changed the course of rivers to fill gigantic reservoirs, the largest of which was 79 metres long and more than 7 metres deep. Nor was that all. For the water to flow from one reservoir to another, the architects had to use the natural incline of the terrain. The upper city, into which the water flows initially, is situated 13 metres higher than the lower side. That was how they retained the water. Aqueducts carried it to the heart of the city. The stored water also made it possible to irrigate the fields for most of the year. The plan of the city was entirely devised to collect the precious water. Dholavira, mistress of the river, seemed to float on mirrors of silver. The ruins of Dholavira are now silent. The relentless heat splits the stone. Water no longer flows in the streets. And yet a strange atmosphere surrounds the visitor. For this city worshipped water more than any other. The citadel at the top of the city also had an ingenious system for collecting rainwater. Gutters channeled rainwater into a large reservoir outside Dholavira. For years, archaeologists pondered the question, what distinction did the Dholavirans make between water from the rivers and water from the sky? For the people of Dholavira, water was the fundamental element in their survival. Its marriage with the earth made crops possible. Its alliance with man allowed souls to be purified. In the heart of the citadel was a sacred place. There, in the middle of a paved esplanade, the Dholavirans had placed 2 tanks and a well, whose mouths gaped toward the heavens. But the men who dug them were thinking of the depths of the earth. The archaeologists have discovered the place of worship. It was a well 4 meters in diameter and 20 meters deep. Women came here to draw water. The edge of the well still has the grooves where the women drew up their water skins with ropes. For the people of Dholavira, the purest water was that drawn from the depths of the earth. The blessed liquid filled 2 small pools in which worshippers performed their ablutions. When descending these steps, they were encountering the power of the earth, the universal mother, and the purifying power of water. Dholavira is no longer in the path of any river. No splash or trickle disturbs the silence of the ruins. Another mystery has long haunted this region. Civilization developed along the river Indus. So why are most of the rediscovered cities in the middle of inhospitable sand deserts? Why do they dot desert valleys? To answer these questions, archaeologists point to an Indian folk song. The Haga Hakra, a river long thought to be a mere legend, once flowed through the Thar Desert. The river has now disappeared, but not without trace.
Still water is stagnating. There is satellite imagery, one thing. Second, the kind of earth we have here is clearly dried up riverbed where we are standing upon. Second, third, evidence of water is still existing there. Otherwise, there was no point of having water there. It is no pond. It is part of riverbed. So these three evidence.
4,500 years ago, a powerful river flowed through this plain. So the Haga Hakra, said to have risen high in the Himalayas, was not a myth after all. While excavating some unusual earthworks, archaeologists discovered dikes that protected fields from flooding. They found the same brick walls, the same system of water management, the same dams. Today, geologists have even found the water. 4,000 years ago, a powerful earthquake changed the course of the river. It shifted further east, towards the Ganges basin. But the groundwater artery was still there, just a few meters beneath the surface. From 1990, new wells were dug and the precious water began to flow again. Over 4,000 years after it disappeared, the Khaga Hakra resurfaced from the depths of the earth. With it, a whole region came back to life. Fields reappeared in the landscape and abandoned villages were repopulated. Much time had passed, but the same methods of cultivating land and making it fertile were rediscovered. Once again, water emerged as the mother of civilization. "2,000 years before Christ, fields of wheat and barley surrounded the cities between the Indus and the Khaga Hakra. Traces found on pottery show that cotton was cultivated. The peasants also grew peas and sesame seeds. They kept buffaloes and zebu cattle, sheep and goats. A diverse, bountiful agriculture fed the cities and kept them prosperous. Soon villages appeared in the most remote regions of the vast country. Civilization was spreading. In the walled cities, artisans were able to perfect their skills. Every city had its craftsman's quarter. Ideas, methods and inventions spread together with trade. In the markets, in jewelers' workshops, scales and weights appeared. The streets teemed with hard-working populations. Stonemasons fashioned new tools, such as jasper drills or polishing stones. The city dwellers mastered the art of making ornaments from cornelian. They made weapons, mirrors and razors, and they excelled in woodwork. Their ceramics reached every corner of the East. They mastered the art of working copper and bronze. Artists carved ivory and set semi-precious stones in gold to make jewellery. The level of production was such that the civilization seemed on the verge of an industrial era.
Nous avons une idée assez précise de la puissance du système économique, c'est-à-dire qu'on a dans les grandes villes de l'Indus, en particulier à Mohenjo-Daro ou à Harappa, des artisanats extrêmement puissants qui produisent des produits que seule cette civilisation sait produire, par exemple des types de céramique d'un type quasi industriel, bon, sans compter tout ce qui a disparu. Hein. La civilisation de l'Indus était probablement un énorme producteur de textiles, un énorme producteur de produits alimentaires transformés avec les techniques de l'époque. Tout ça, évidemment, on n'en a aucune trace, tout ça a disparu. Mais en gros, on peut dire que la civilisation de l'Indus, dans la civilisation de l'Indus, certaines productions avaient un statut qu'on qualifierait aujourd'hui d'industriel et étaient exportées dans tout le monde, tout autour, dans le Golfe, jusqu'en Mésopotamie.
With their first trading journeys, the people of the Indus took care to mark their products with clay stamps or copper plates. But their favourite method was seals made of steatite, a material that hardens when heated. Merchants hung them around their necks, and they were widely used. The development of long-distance trade led the Indus merchants to forge alliances and to invent the concept of the contract. To seal a contract, they used finely carved stone cylinders, similar to those in Mesopotamia. More than 2,000 of these seals have been found. They're carved with animal profiles, zebu, buffalo, crocodiles, all with more intricate and mysterious motifs. Inscriptions accompany the images. Archaeologists have identified over 400 recurring signs.
Un des problèmes de la civilisation de l'Indus, c'est que ces gens-là écrivaient, ça on le sait, on en a des milliers et des milliers de documents, mais ils écrivaient sur un support vraisemblablement périssable, ce qui fait qu'on n'a pas retrouvé les vrais écrits. Ce qu'on a retrouvé, c'est, comme ce serait chez nous, les plaques de rue, les indications sur des porte-clés, enfin tout ce qui est resté solide, mais le support périssable, lui, a disparu. Donc on ne sait pas, on n'a pas de texte. Donc on a vu arriver sur la scène une civilisation qui écrivait, mais on ne savait pas, on a pensé que c'était simplement une écriture magique, qui était... En fait, c'est une civilisation qui a probablement tout un fonctionnement politique et administratif, comme la civilisation égyptienne, comme la mésopotamienne. Évidemment, tant qu'on n'aura pas réussi à déchiffrer l'écriture, c'est-à-dire à trouver un texte assez long pour y appliquer les techniques classiques de déchiffrement, on ne sait pas à l'heure actuelle même quel type de langue ces gens parlaient.
In 1999, a wave of excitement ran through the Dholavira site. At the foot of the northern entrance, the archaeological team had made a discovery. Their brushes uncovered what looked like an inscription. After several minutes of careful work, symbols finally emerged. All the workers gathered to watch. Everyone held their breath. It could be an historic moment. If the text was long enough, the Indus script might finally be deciphered. One after another, the symbols were uncovered. Made of inlaid quartz, they were over 30 centimetres high. Originally, they were probably set in a wooden tablet, long since rotted away. The team was on tenterhooks to recover a message composed over 4,000 years ago. After several hours, the archaeologists had to accept the inevitable. Once again, they had uncovered only a handful of signs. The Indus script has yet to find its Rosetta Stone. What do these signs mean? What do they tell us about the structure of a civilization that for a long time was thought to be ruled by a single man, the priest king?
I think this is the oldest signboard in the world, going back to the Harappan times. While excavating, we found that a wooden frame all around it, and those letters must have been pasted or laid in that wooden board. And I don't think this is the rightful place for this inscription to lie here. I believe that it should have been spotted on the facade of this majestic north gate. I don't think, we should brought in the concept of priest-king sort of thing. One doesn't know. But the kind of situation we see here, we see that, we think that Harappan Empire was not ruled by one person. It was an economic empire, it was a cultural empire, within which there were several rulers. Some were mightier than the rest, mightiest. One might have been the mightiest, who knows. There were several kings, or some princelings, ruling over larger and smaller kingdoms.
Will these 9 stone figures keep their secret forever? Did the northern entrance of the Dholavira citadel bear the name of the sovereign who ruled the region? Some experts think so. But others, pointing to the wheels in the inscription, think it represents the first example of a traffic sign, put up at the entrance of a city. The archaeologists can only dream. Perhaps somewhere the miraculous treasure awaits them, the find that will solve the mystery of a civilization whose thought eludes us. Did it have poets and writers? What were its legends? What was its concept of the world? Without these texts, we will never really understand this civilization, which soon set its eyes on faraway lands. "4,000 years ago, the people of the Indus set out to find the mineral resources they lacked. They needed copper, tin, silver, and lapis lazuli. Their caravans took the road west, towards Baluchistan and today's Iran. They founded colonies over 1,500 kilometers from their homeland, on the borders of Afghanistan. Soon they were looking beyond the Kutch marshes and the Indus Delta. Beyond were lands that attracted them, lands where they could establish harbours. A strategy of exchange and trade was taking shape. Up until then, the people of the Indus Valley had only been boatmen. Their craft went up and down the rivers, carrying passengers and goods over hundreds of kilometres. These small craft live on in Pakistan. Flat-bottomed boats, suited for shallow waters, still ply the rivers. Their design has hardly changed in 4,000 years.
बहुत 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 सारा बिल्कुल ये आपके लिए ये रोजी है हमको पता चल
तकरीबन ये काम जो है कौन से महीने में से लेकर कौन से महीने तक होता है
सर्दियों में से चलता है 6 महीने सर्दी का 6 महीने पानी छोटा हो जाता है माना ये लग जाता है नीचे जाके
Cautiously, the first navigators followed the shores of the Sea of Oman westward. Sea transport soon proved its value. It was faster than the long and vulnerable overland routes, and above all, boats carried far more cargo. But where were the merchant vessels making for?
Le commerce maritime de la civilisation de l'Indus est une question qu'on a abordée depuis une vingtaine d'années, en gros. On savait que les fleuves avaient été utilisés pour le commerce entre les villes de l'Indus. La question du commerce maritime est beaucoup plus délicate. On connaît du matériel de l'Indus qui vient dans la péninsule d'Oman, c'est-à-dire les Émirats arabes unis et l'actuel sultanat d'Oman. On en connaît à Bahreïn et on en connaît en Mésopotamie. Beaucoup plus que ça, on a des textes mésopotamiens, un texte de Sargon d'Akkad vers 2300 qui nous dit que sont venus s'amarrer au quai de sa capitale les bateaux de Dilmun, qui est la zone entre le Koweït et le Qatar, dont l'île de Bahreïn est à l'époque le centre, des bateaux de Magan, qui est la péninsule d'Oman, et des bateaux de Melouha, qui est le pays de l'Indus. Et probablement qu'en fait c'était un commerce multiple qui faisait intervenir des gens de toutes ces zones-là. Il semble bien qu'en fait les gens qui se soient les premiers lancés à l'eau, c'était pas les gens de l'Indus qui sont des terriens, En plus, il faut bien imaginer que toute cette zone de l'actuel delta de l'Indus est une zone d'immenses marais, de zone difficile, vraiment difficile de passage, et en plus des côtes maritimes aussi très difficiles à naviguer. Mais au bout d'un moment, évidemment, tout le monde s'est mis à naviguer. Et à ce moment-là, le milieu du 3e millénaire avant Jésus-Christ est un grand moment de commerce international, commerce dans lequel passent des objets précieux, comme par exemple les grandes perles en cornaline que fabriquent les gens de l'Indus et qui sont seuls à fabriquer et à savoir fabriquer, mais aussi le commerce, c'est toujours des étoffes, y compris des étoffes précieuses que les gens de Mésopotamie, les gens de l'Indus fabriquent et probablement échangent. Et puis c'est tout un tas de choses qui viennent de très loin. Il vient des peignes en ivoire d'éléphant, il vient plein de choses qui peuvent venir, y compris du fin fond des forêts de la vallée du Gange.
A fabulous odyssey began. The first navigators sailed toward the unknown and discovered the world. Sailing from Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro or Dholavira, the boats reached the Oman Peninsula. Then, via the Strait of Hormuz, they sailed the Persian Gulf all the way to faraway Mesopotamia, 3,500 kilometers from the Indus Valley. Abu Dhabi, capital of the United Arab Emirates, at the entrance of the Persian Gulf. Today it is a bustling commercial port, where fishing boats jostle with freighters and tankers. And it was here that the merchants from the Indus landed. With their totally different culture and language, how did they make their first contact?
Comment communiquer ces gens quand ils rentraient en contact? On a un texte sumérien, c'est-à-dire la fin du 3e millénaire en Mésopotamie, qui parle d'un traducteur de Meloucha, c'est-à-dire quelqu'un qui sait la langue de l'Indus et la langue sumérienne. Et c'est dommage qu'il ne nous ait pas laissé un dictionnaire d'ailleurs, celui-là. En fait, il faut bien imaginer que tout ce monde préhistorique, où les gens échangent sans arrêt, est un monde multilingue. C'est notre monde à nous qui devient un monde où les gens parlent une langue plus l'anglais maintenant. Ce monde-là est un monde où souvent les langues ne couvraient que quelques milliers de personnes et le groupe d'à côté parlait une autre langue. Et donc, de proche en proche, tous ces gens-là devaient pouvoir se comprendre.
The island of Nna. The influence of its civilization spread far and wide over the Arabian desert. Its royal tombs tell the story. In them, archaeologists have discovered cornelian ornaments and ceramics typical of the Indus Valley.
This hole or this burials goes back to sometime between 2300 and 2000 BC. So the material anyway, mainly the pottery is under study, but so far we have identified at least, I can say, 10% of the whole collection that was imported from outside, mainly from the Indus and Balochistan.
Even further off, well inside the Persian Gulf, archaeologists are combing the island of Bahrain for proof of a cultural marriage between the Indus and Mesopotamia. It's a huge task. They have identified 1,000 tombs scattered across 695 square kilometers. In this burial complex, Dr. As-Sindi is looking for the great prize, a text that would allow scholars to translate the inscriptions of the Indus civilization. In the world of archaeology, that would have the same impact as Jean-François Champollion's deciphering of Egyptian hieroglyphs in the 1820s.
I hope that one day we will find in one grave two inscriptions together, Indus Valley and Mesopotamia, and we can find we solve the problem in one grave in Bahrain. This is we hope that, and don't forget that Bahrain here we have 1,000 burial mound, and if there is two merchants, two cultures, Mesopotamian and Indus Valley, coming and sit together here in Delmon for a long time, we believe that one day we will find.
History teaches that even the greatest civilizations are destined to disappear. The Indus civilization was no exception. From 1800 BC onward, it was no longer mentioned in Mesopotamian tablets. Little by little, the streets of its cities emptied of people. The craftsmen's quarters no longer rang to the sound of tools. The buildings and irrigation systems were left to crumble. The great cities were ravaged by time and the elements. How can we explain this sudden decay? Theories abound. Some experts think the empire succumbed to invaders from Central Asia. Others suggest that it was devastated by floods or earthquakes. What cataclysm brought about the end of these magnificent cities? And where did their people go? Did they die? Did they flee? Did the disappearance of the Hakra River force irreversible changes to their way of life? We have no texts to shed light on all this, and we know too little of how the Indus administration worked to be able to pin down the causes of their decline. And can we really speak of a decline? What do we know of the world that succeeded the Indus civilization?
Comment disparaît la civilisation de l'Indus? Bon, la première réponse, c'est probablement qu'elle disparaît pas, au moins comme ça. Ce qui est certain, c'est qu'à partir d'une date qu'on peut fixer, ça dépend des auteurs, mais disons aux alentours de 2000 avant Jésus-Christ, on assiste à ce qu'on appelle une régionalisation, c'est-à-dire que cette énorme unité culturelle disparaît au profit d'entités régionales qui continuent assez longtemps. Les grandes villes ont été abandonnées, ça c'est sûr, ce qui arrive en fait très fréquemment. Alors si les grandes villes sont abandonnées, c'est en gros parce que la manière dont la société fonctionne ne peut plus les supporter économiquement. Mais ça ne veut pas dire que les gens sont partis. Ça veut dire qu'ils se sont mis à vivre autrement et que cet autrement est moins visible pour l'archéologie. Ça, c'est un des vrais problèmes, c'est que les archéologues ne savent pas tout voir.
The empire literally fell apart. The fertile lands around Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro or Dholavira formed independent states. New crops appeared, and the peasants began to raise horses, camels and donkeys. Gradually, what had been one people adopted a variety of cultures. And yet, some have preserved a part of this heritage. Adalaj, a temple in the heart of India. At the foot of these steps, carved in the rock in the 16th century, there's a large well. It's a passage between two worlds, between the entrails of the earth and the heavens. Thousands of worshippers still come here to gaze at the smooth surface of this water. It's thought to be the purest water of all. The elusive civilization of the Indus was a brilliant chapter in the human story. Today, the banks of the Ganges ring with the calls of the faithful, heirs to a long tradition. That is the legacy. It was passed on to medieval and modern India, and it reaches us, seemingly unchanged. These gestures, these chants, seem to have crossed the centuries. Watching the rituals of the Indian faithful worshipping a benevolent god in the river Ganges, we see the faces of the people of the Indus, a people who, to build their empire, became the masters of the river.